Janice Kung is a health librarian at the University of Alberta. She was also the visiting program officer for AI and library services in 2025 with the Canadian Association of Research Libraries. Her professional interests include generative AI's impact on libraries, systematic reviews, responsible research metrics, and integrating effective pedagogy into library instruction. I'm going to invite folks to give Janice a warm welcome into this virtual space. I know it's hard to do sometimes, but we can use whatever Zoom emoji of choice that speaks to you. And I'd like to welcome Janice and invite her to just take it away.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm leading this talk on embedding an equity lens to generative AI's impact on libraries. Before I begin, I would respectfully acknowledge that I am situated on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. And you're probably wondering, why is a health sciences librarian doing a talk about AI? Well, here's a little bit about me. And Cecilia did a fantastic job of providing that introduction. So a few other things of why I might be leading this discussion. I was an early adopter of AI all the way back from November of 2022 when ChatGPT first launched for the public. To date, I have taught over 20 AI workshops to a diverse range of audience members, from students to library administrators to librarians and members of the public. And I'm just really interested to see how this will shape up, impacting our work in libraries. And this is an ongoing professional development area for me. So I am in no way an expert in this area, but I have done a lot of reading and learning in this space. So that's me. And now I would like to learn a little bit about all of you. We have a great attendance today, and I would like to learn where you're coming from, how are you feeling about AI? So I have three very quick questions for all of you. So I'm just going to put the audience response system here in the slides, and I will also put the link in the chat. I hope that is coming across for everybody. I'm not sure. Oh, I have to click to everyone. There we go. Okay, so I'll give everyone a few seconds here to sign on. And so you can answer three quick questions. The first question is, what type of library do you work in? And for those who listed other, please feel free to put it in the chat. Are you in an archive? What did I miss? And I want to try to make sure I tailor this session to all of you, depending on who is in the webinar today. Okay, so we have a good majority of you in academic libraries. Oh, and legislative library. Oh, excellent. Welcome. And some special libraries, a couple of school libraries and public libraries. Super. Okay. Oh, and we have instructors. You're also welcome. Yes, that's okay if you're not a librarian. Yep, it's all good. Yep. So hopefully there will be some information here that will be pertinent to everyone here. Second question. What emotion best represents how you feel about generative AI? Are you excited about it? Are you fearful? Are you ambivalent? Are you nervous about it? So there's a lot of feelings when it comes to AI. I love meh, interested, exhausted. Look at all of these emotions. Oh my goodness. Curious, skeptical, apprehensive, uncertain, negative. Okay, excited, tired. I think I said tired already. Concerned. Excellent. So there are a lot of feelings. And all of these feelings are valid. I have all of these feelings that I share with you. So you can see how AI is very complex. There are no easy answers. And I worry that after today's talk, you will still be perplexed and confused because I am. I still am. So thank you so much for participating in that. Last question. What kind of generative AI tools have you used before or have you tried? And perhaps you have tried none. Yeah, perfect. So there are some that have not tried any. And this will help me get a better understanding of, where you're all at when it comes to AI. So there's ChatGPT I'm seeing, Site.ai Copilot. Oh, wow. So it's wonderful to see that some of you have tried and experimented with it and some of you have not, which is perfectly fine. I saw Research Rabbit, Open Evidence, Perplexity. Okay, so we run the gamut. You can see there are a lot of tools out there. All right. Well, thank you so much for participating in that. Okay, Scopus AI, Notebook LM. Yeah, excellent. This is great. Thank you so much for participating. That will conclude the audience participation for this talk because I do have a lot of content to cover. I apologize. So you're going to just sit back, relax, and you're going to hear me talk for the next 35 to 40 minutes here, and then we will leave plenty of time for question and answers at the end. So I hope you can still see my slides. I'm just going to double check with my team here to see if you're okay that the slides are advancing. Yes, thank you so much. Okay. How I'm going to structure the talk today is in 4 sections. The first section is how does generative AI work? And I'm sure many of us already know about this, but I just want to do a quick introduction to make sure we're all on the same page. And then we will shift gears to look at how are libraries responding to AI. And then we'll move into the question on ethical implementation. Can we ethically implement AI tools into our work in libraries? And finally, I will provide some suggestions on how we can advocate for ourselves and for our users in this space, in the AI landscape. So lots of complex things that we're going to be covering today, and I hope I'll do a good job of it. So first off, how does generative AI work? The focus for the talk will be on text-based AI tools, but of course we know that AI comes in many different outputs, such as images, audio, video. But for the just to kind of keep things simple, we'll only focus on text-based AI tools. So when we talk about text-based tools such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, how does it work? In order to understand how generative AI works, we must take a step back and understand how large language models work, or LLMs. LLMs use statistical models to analyze huge amounts of data to learn patterns and connections between words and phrases. Think about the English language, the grammar. We have a lot of patterns that we see consistently, right? And so how the AI models work is that they are calculating the probability of how to string up all of these words together. What is the probability of the first word and the next and the next, or the next sequence of words? And how AI does this is by creating tokens, which is mapping text to numbers. So in order for all of this magical algorithm to work on the back end, for it to return these outputs to us, they have to assign numbers to all of these words so that they can do all these fancy calculations that I do not understand. So this image here gives you that simplified view of how the tokens work. So you can see the different colors, the different words, they all represent a token in the AI model. Another way to think of this is like AI tools are kind of like word predictors or word probability calculators. So what they're doing is they're predicting what a good answer usually looks like based on the patterns in the training data. And because it is predicting how the words are structured together, it's actually not going to the original sources or verifying or fact checking before it's returning the outputs back to us. But some of you who might know a little bit more about AI is that there is this thing called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, where they are going to the original source. But we're just going to put that aside for now. In general, the AI models are using these word predictability calculations to figure out what is the best answer for their human overlords. And so you can see at scale how these systems can extrapolate to sentences, paragraphs, and full-fledged essays. And we just have to remember that it is not verifying any of the information back to us. It's giving us the most likely answer that hopefully it will appease us. So now that you have a general understanding of how AI works, how can we use it effectively? Because of how the model works, based on the probability calculations, in order for us to get really good outputs from it, we need to have good inputs. So what are some good prompts for us to put in as the human, as the end user? So here are some suggestions on how to write good prompts if you choose to use AI tools. But you don't have to, but if you do, here are some suggestions. Try to be as specific as you can about what you're looking for. You can get AI to assign a role to it. Act like a research librarian in a university library. Act like a community librarian in a public library, that kind of thing. And you can also specify what kind of output you want from it. You can provide plenty of examples to give the AI tool more on what exactly you're looking for. And you can also build on previous prompts. It's an ongoing conversation. It kind of retains the history of it. And also don't be afraid to correct mistakes, to go back and say, actually, that's not what I mean. Can you try again in this context? I also provided some strategies of when it would be appropriate to use generative AI tools and when we should not be using it. So you can just see that there's a lot of things to learn within this own space of how can we use AI effectively. So moving on, how are libraries currently responding to this space? Some of you might be thinking, well, we're not doing anything about it, which is totally fair. But this is what I have been seeing in terms of how our library is trying to be proactive. The first thing is we have to build our own competencies in this space. So a lot of upskilling, professional development, and I'm still doing that. It's an ongoing process. The ACRL, which is the Association of College and Research Libraries, they developed these AI competencies for library workers in the academic setting. But I think that it's applicable to all library workers. And these competencies were approved in October of 2025. And very quickly here, we'll just go through each one. For the first one, ethical considerations, I think you kind of know what that is. What is that talking about? It's talking about how can we, as library staff, advocate for equitable access, promote fairness in the use of the data, and how AI systems are designed. That we want to try to protect intellectual property rights and consider broader AI impacts on communities, workers, and the environment. The second point there, pretty straightforward. It's looking at how does AI work? Do we understand it? Do we truly understand how AI models work and how it's getting the outputs that is being returned to us? For the third point, are we able to evaluate tools and analyze? Can we analyze the outputs, evaluate all the different AI models that are out there? And finally, can we integrate AI into job-related tasks and explore AI for innovation? So there are pros and cons to AI, and some of you might feel that, well, I feel more on the negative side, that there are more cons, there aren't that many pros, which is perfectly fine. But others would also argue that there are benefits to AI. So you see how it's very complicated. Constantly, I'm feeling this tug of war between these two factors. What else are libraries doing? Well, we're doing a lot of instruction and education around this topic. So we are expanding information literacy to now encompass AI literacy. So I would argue that AI literacy is an extension of digital literacy, which is an extension of information literacy. And this is something that we have been doing since the beginning of time. Rather than defining what AI literacy is, I thought it would be interesting to show you that it actually shares many of the themes from that ACRL AI competency framework, where it's trying to teach our patrons, do they understand how AI works? Can they use it effectively? Can they evaluate? Can they use it ethically and consider all of the ethical implications surrounding AI? If you're interested in learning more about this, I also provided 3 AI literacy frameworks that you can explore on your own. And it gives you some of the important pointers of what you should be covering if you want to teach AI literacy. By the way, the slides should be shared with you so that you can kind of click on the links and navigate as we go. But it will also be shared at the end as well. So I think that you should be able to have access to the slides here. Okay, so all the links should take you to all the proper sources. So what am I doing about it? Because I've been doing a lot of teaching in this space. So I have another approach on how I do it. I use my care approach that I developed, and a huge asterisk here because I know there are so many different care frameworks that are out there. So this one is mine that I coined. So this is to help me remember what should I be covering when I am teaching AI. So to take care, my care approach is I want to ensure that the students, the audience that I'm talking to, that they are thinking critically about this. When they're looking at the AI outputs, are is it accurate? Is there bias with that output? What's missing? What is incorrect about it? The awareness piece is looking at whether or not they have a good understanding of how AI works. What are the limitations? What are the ethical concerns around it? Responsibility is looking at the ethical use of it. We want to use it responsibly. We want to assign proper attribution whenever we are using AI in any of our work. And for those of us in the academic setting, we want to ensure that students are upholding academic integrity. So that's responsibility. Lastly, effectiveness. Is AI the right tool for the job? There are so many other tools that are already available for us. And perhaps we don't need AI, right? So I always kind of push this back on the students because they think this is the new shiny tool that they can use. But sometimes it might not be the best tool. And we just kind of have to encourage them to think critically about this on what existing tools are already there that are better than AI. So lots to think about there. Libraries could also be doing a lot of other teaching around AI. So the first obvious one is foundational AI literacy workshops, programming sessions around this. For public libraries, something that you could consider is maybe developing some workshops around scam prevention. There are a lot of bad actors trying to use AI to scam people out of money, out of so many terrible things. And perhaps it would be useful for the community to be aware of what to look out for. How can they spot these scams that are AI generated? For those of us in academic settings, we can provide some instruction, guide researchers on how they may use AI tools across the different stages of the research life cycle. Because they're always trying to look for ways to be more efficient. Where are the time savings? That kind of thing. So this is something that there is a healthy appetite for, I believe, in post-secondary institutions. So this is where we can also offer some expertise in that space. While at the same time, we have to ensure that they are safeguarding their own research. We have to remind them not to upload or import any of their sensitive or confidential data or information into these AI models, and to also remind them to ensure compliance with AI policies and guidelines. If they are applying for grants, do they have any AI policies of whether or not they may use AI to help them with that grant application? When they're submitting manuscripts to journals, do they have any policies around that? Do they allow authors to use AI in their manuscript in that work? So lots of things to think about kind of upfront at the beginning of the research project because there are all of these implications kind of later on down the road. How about creating some workshops on how can they use AI to create? So this is an interesting take because we could be developing hubs for Makerspace 2.0, makerspaces using AI tools. But if we do this, we have to ensure that we have those critical discussions about intellectual property and to encourage our users to be ethical creators. So it's a very fine line. But here are some opportunities of what libraries could be doing. There's also a lot of experimentation and application in libraries that I'm seeing as well. They're using AI to enhance discovery in databases and discovery tools. And they're also using AI to enhance metadata. One example here is from OCL, which is the Ontario Council of University Libraries. They're doing a lot of amazing AI projects in OCL. And so the link there is taking you to one of their projects to enhance the metadata for government documents because we all know the metadata for government documents is a total mess. So they're trying to clean that up. Closer to home, at the University of Alberta, They recently completed a project focusing on metadata generation on Chinese, Japanese, and Korean materials. So lots of interesting things that they discovered there. So if you're interested in what they found, we could talk about that more in the Q&A. Also, accessibility. There are some opportunities for language translation to help with increasing accessibility to our materials. And another link there is taking you to another project by OCL, where they are working on using AI to translate audio files to text. So audio to text. And how they're doing that is by using Whisper AI, which is an open access automation speech recognition system to transcribe audio files. And they're working up this really interesting pipeline for all of the member libraries in OCL so that they may use this system to apply the AI model for all of their audio to text projects. So very, very interesting stuff. Administratively, we could also use AI for building capacity. AI tools could be used for forecasting budgets in libraries, project management, for communication, such as drafting emails and coding. So there are some things that we could use as library staff that we could use it to help us with our work, to enhance the work, not to replace the work, but to enhance. It is also being used for cataloging. There's one example here from the Library of Congress where they are exploring whether AI can help catalogers generate metadata for uncatalogued digital materials, including backlogs of ebooks. So that is something that they're also experimenting with. Next, some libraries are also piloting AI chatbots for FAQs to have that available for patrons during off hours. So there is some work being done in that area as well. That is also very controversial because there's the whole aspect of is this going to displace jobs in libraries, right? So I do not have the answers, but I do know that this is a very contentious issue around the virtual reference. But I have to acknowledge that this is being experimented on in some libraries. So I don't have the answers. I'm just giving you the information, and then we can talk more about that later. Now let's talk about the ethical implementation of AI in libraries. How can libraries ethically implement these tools? This is a really tough question to answer, but here are some of the things that I considered while I was preparing for this talk. How can we ethically implement AI tools when there are so many negative connotations behind it? There's this quote from Dr. Lowe that really resonated with me because every time when I'm thinking about libraries and implementing AI tools, we have to really understand what AI is doing, right? So Dr. Lowe says, quote, every generated answer carries a history. The data that trained it, the assumptions that shaped it, the voices the algorithm chose to amplify or silence. Real understanding means tracing those histories, not just accepting their polish. So I always keep this quote in the back of my mind every time when I'm thinking about how we are integrating AI into our work. So you can see how there's, again, that tug of war again, right? The pros and the cons behind this. So let's talk about equity. When we are talking about the equity of access, the defining factor of equity is free versus paid. Again, this is not new in library land. We always have to consider the free versus paid situation. But now with AI, I feel like it is pulling that digital divide even further. Thinking about wealthy universities where they are able to have the institutional AI licenses versus others that do not. Schools as well. Schools that are able to afford the licenses versus those that do not. How about rural and underserved communities? On the one hand, AI increases access to information, but it could also deepen the digital divide where rural areas have less institutional capabilities or capacity to consistently run the tools. They just have weaker connectivity. They don't have as much bandwidth, right? They don't have enough cell towers to have the networking available. So all of these issues are coming to a head, and we still don't have answers for them. We also have to think about how AI models are trained. There will always be bias inherent in the training model, and they probably have more urban data compared to rural data. So that is reinforcing existing marginalization when it comes to the equity angle. But on the other hand, it could also improve access as well. So the two quotes I have there is from an article where it's talking about the potential of generative AI for good, where we could get AI models to watch, quote unquote, old films and tagging them to improve the metadata for those materials to improve discoverability. So that's a good thing. It could also be used for language and voice models to enhance translation and dubbing, which will again improve the accessibility of those materials. So you can see how, once again, that tug of like there's the good things of it, but also the bad things of it. So it's very tricky for us to have a good firm stance of where we should be sitting when it comes to AI in libraries. How about sourcing AI tools? Some of you may have already licensed AI tools in your institutions, as we saw, Scopus AI and other things. So here are some questions that we must consider when we want to source AI tools. So the first thing is we want to figure out what data was used to train those models. Is the training data documented or auditable? Can we audit where that information is coming from? Do the vendors publish any additional information for us to have a really good grasp of what kind of information is in that AI model or that AI tool? So do they publish model cards, data statements, or do they bias their own audits? So we'll circle back to this. You're probably wondering what is a model card? So keep that in the back of your minds. We'll talk about that in a moment. What about the user inputs? What's happening to their information? Are the vendors retaining that information? Are they taking it and feeding it back to retrain the model? Or is the data anonymized or can it be deleted? Are those tools complying with local privacy laws? For example, the Data Privacy Act, or in Europe, across the pond, they have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Do we have those equivalents in your own local environments? So a lot of things to think about in terms of privacy when it comes to licensing these tools. Finally, for accountability, is there a clear process for the library to report on harm or errors? And how are the vendors keeping the humans in the loop for this whole thing? Can the system explain outputs or decision logic at a meaningful level? So let's go back to the model cards. I found this really interesting. So a model card is like a nutrition label for AI systems. It's going to include all the specs of what is included in that AI tool, such as its intended use. Is it for summarization, for search, for classification? It's usually going to include some information about how the model was trained, how it performs. If it's a good model card, they will also mention the biases and limitations and the ethical considerations that they thought of while developing that model. And they're also going to include some versioning and updates. How often are they going to update that model or maintain it? If the vendor does not have a model card, which is very unlikely, this is not a standard in any way, but it should be. So if they do not have a model card, then you need to ask really good procurement questions to get at those answers. And I also have an example there, a link to Gemma's model card, which is an AI product from Google. Speaking of data, we also have to consider data sovereignty, especially when it comes to Indigenous data. So Indigenous people should have a right to all of these things with their own data. They should be able to control what data is collected or used or applied in any AI models. And they should be able to govern their own data according to their own laws, protocols, and values. So this comes into play because sometimes researchers are experimenting with uploading data into large language models or even local LLMs. Even in that case, we have to be very cautious and be mindful of what data is feeding into the AI model and what is not, what should be included and what should not be. So lots of things that we have to just kind of, again, educate and inform researchers whenever they are experimenting with AI and data. What else am I seeing in libraries? They are putting out these AI guidance or policy documents. And I have some examples here from different libraries, from national libraries, university libraries, and even public libraries. So these documents are kind of like a public-facing article, statement, toolkit, what have you. And it tells the public on what the library stance is when it comes to AI. What are they using AI for? What are they not using AI for? And I think these documents are a really nice way to just inform your users, but also the library staff on, yeah, what is your stance? How do you feel about AI? And this might be something that your library wants to consider. Do you want to publish an AI guidance or a policy document to better inform your users and your staff? All right, next is time for a story. So I heard this story from a webinar that I attended last year. It's a story about archives. So for those of you who might have an archival background or archival interest, this story is for you. So the story goes like this. There is an archive in Illinois that was using slave sale records from the 1700s and feeding that data into AI to produce a picture of what that person might have looked like based on the information on their bill of sale, including their height, width, build, skin color, etc. So when I first heard this, I thought, oh my goodness, this is the worst idea ever, right? What are the ethical implications of this as library staff doing this? I'm sure they had really altruistic, really good intentions when they did this. They might have thought, well, let's humanize these individuals in history and to better tell their story, or who knows why. But I just thought this is such an interesting example of how we might be using the data perhaps in an unethical way, right? So lots to consider in this space. I don't have the answers, just giving you the information, and then we can talk more about this, right? We need to reflect. What is ethical? What is unethical when it comes to data and AI? Of course, there are many other ethical considerations, so we have to take a closer look at this. We can't get away from talking about AI without the environmental impacts. Generative AI and the environment is so tricky, and here's why. Of course, there are impacts on water. We have to cool the servers. There is an impact on energy, electricity to run the servers and the data centers. There's impact on communities that live nearby these data centers. There is a water supply stress on them, increased electricity demand that may have an impact on their electricity usage. There's also pollution risks, health risks, noise pollution, because they're living so close to the data centers that it's probably really loud running all of these machines and equipment. There's also minerals extraction. Whenever we think about servers and data centers, we have to keep in mind that they're using AI chips, networking equipment, in fact, state-of-the-art equipment to build the servers, which means that the mining industry to feed this entire endeavor has an environmental cost, land use, mine waste, etc. So the complexity comes in place where generative AI is one tiny portion of how we are using these servers and these data centers, right? It's only a tiny portion. We're using them for other things as well. For the Zoom call, right? We're on the internet. We're using the servers, the data centers for our emails, YouTube, Netflix, for our library systems. They're all cloud-based, right? So there is impact, but we just don't know to what extent generative AI's impact looks, amongst all of that other energy usage. So I'm saying it's not zero, but we don't know to what extent. And that's a problem because these AI companies are not disclosing what how much energy they're using. And there currently are no standards of reporting for that. If you're interested in learning more about it, I would recommend you reading Nicole Hennig's handout about understanding the full picture of AI's environmental impact because it is very complex. It's not as straightforward as you would think that it is entirely evil. Well, maybe, I don't know. But again, there are the pros and cons that we must weigh in this space. So, just some more information for you to learn more and to have some thoughtful reflection on. Here are some other ethical concerns. I think this is not a surprise for this audience here. The copyright is interesting. I've been following a lot of the court cases. There are a lot of lawsuits, and it is not settled case law yet. There are some cases where they claim fair use is warranted, while in others, they say that fair use was rejected. So, what is the answer? You see how it's still uncertain in the courts. And there are still many lawsuits that are still playing out in the court system. So this won't get settled anytime soon, I don't think. And some of you might argue that it is a copyright infringement, but others would argue that it is fair use. I don't know. I don't have answers once again. Another ethical concern is that there is a human cost to how AI tools are generated. One example of this is ChatGPT. There was an article published in 2023 where they discovered that OpenAI, which is the company behind ChatGPT, they used Kenyan workers and they paid them very, very little money to clean, to sanitize the data before it was fed into the training models. So what does that mean? Because AI models are literally just scraping data from the internet, that there's a lot of really negative content that they're scraping in, right? So they have to remove that terrible stuff before it's fed into the training model. So these Kenyan laborers, they have to go through that content and they were traumatized because they were exposed to violent sexual assault information, child abuse materials, and so on and so forth. So there is that human cost that we really don't think about when it comes to AI. Another ethical concern, is there a potential over reliance on AI? We're seeing a lot of articles on students just using it for everything nowadays. That are they potentially diminishing their critical thinking skills and agency? Are we, if we use it too much? So a lot of uncertainty there. And research is in this space where it's not doing good things to our brain, right? When we are over relying on it. And of course, the data privacy security aspect of if people are unaware of what they are uploading into these tools, that it could potentially be leaked, lots of negative things there. There are also many other ethical concerns that you might be thinking of that just in the interest of time, I won't cover, but many, many other things. All right, let's move on. Last, how can we advocate as library staff? What is next for us? Here are some things that we can consider. We have to advocate for the free tools, or do we want to advocate for having some AI tools being funded because of how important it is to our users, right? Can we advocate for fair licensing and sustainable pricing models if we are licensing AI tools? Again, we have to think about data sovereignty, think about the care principles and the fair principles for those of you who are kind of aware of data sovereignty in this space. And we want to push back on vendors. If they have any default options, we have to push back and say, no, we want to customize. We don't want these things happening. So, a lot of things that we can advocate for. From the AI literacy lens, I think this is going to be a core service that we offer moving forward. If your institutions are having any conversations about AI literacy, are you at the table? If not, you have to elbow your way in because I really feel that we have expertise to be able to speak to these kinds of things. We also want to advocate for being environmentally responsible. So, what would that look like? If we are licensing AI tools, are the vendors disclosing energy use? If not, push back and say, well, we need this information. This is really important for us to consider if we are licensing these tools. Again, the AI literacy aspect. We want to inform and educate patrons about AI's environmental impacts. Can we be part of the conversation for policy and regulation development? We want to make sure that anything that we're trying to push aligns with library priorities and push for regulation that protect us as library staff and also our patrons. And at the end of the day, we really need that human oversight. Whenever automation is being fed into the picture of our projects, of our work, are humans involved? If not, that is a huge red flag to me. And we cannot advocate for any of this if we don't know what we're talking about. So the staff training piece is really crucial that we must level up, so to speak, so that we are able to have these really critical conversations. So what does that look like, staff training? We want to anchor the training again to our existing priorities about digital literacy, equity and access, and so on and so forth. We want to frame AI as an opportunity and risk, both sides. It's not all good, not all bad, but we have to really consider that in our training and also on how we're educating others. Do you want to develop an AI community of practice at your institution? Perhaps you already have one. Please share what's working, what's not. And there might be other ways on how we can do better, on how we can enhance and develop our expertise in this area. Some of you might be thinking, well, it's not ethical to use AI. And I have this really interesting conversation with others, not all the time, but quite regularly, with other library colleagues, with students, with faculty. And so this would be my argument. Yes, to some extent, it could be unethical to use AI, but AI is simply another way to get at information, right? So at the end of the day, we are information professionals, and I think it's really important for us to be proactive and to be part of the conversation because no matter what, the end users will use AI, right? We can't just tell them don't use it and then they'll listen to us. I don't think so. So we have to say, okay, you want to use these AI tools because it's out there, it's available. Here's how to use it responsibly. Here's what it can do and what it can't do. And I think this is really important and it will keep us relevant and part of the conversation. Thank you so much for your attention. I apologize for talking and talking and talking your ears off, but now we welcome any comments or questions that you have at this time.